So, Seth, before you do that, could you just do roll call for us?
Governor Kitzhaber, Nancy Gold,
Here.
Julia Brim Edwards, Yvonne Curtis,
Here.
Matthew Donegan, Samuel Henry,
Here.
Nicole Mayer,
Here.
Mark Mobile, David Reeves,
Here.
Ron Saxton, Mary Spildy, Kay Turan,
Here.
Hannah Vandering.
Here. Okay, so we need to take a look at the minutes, and I'm looking for approval of the minutes.
So
Yes.
move.
Is there a second?
Second?
Okay, it's been moved to second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved. So we're going to just take, if people are going to be talking to us about the 3-year strategic plan and metrics, if you want to just come up and get ready, we're going to try to get the other members online, and then we'll begin. Okay, I think we're ready to begin. So, Whitney, are you going to start and do introductions, or?
I think
Oh, Rudy, great.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Vice Chair. The document that you have before you, and members of the board, those on the phone, hopefully you have it as well, really reflects the input of sort of everyone connected to the work that this board has been sort of pushing in one form or another. There have been many conversations that we've had, and those conversations have always, to the best of our ability, tried to be as focused as they possibly could be on the work itself of being able to meet the specific objectives that the governor set forward. But as you might guess, anytime a new body comes together and anytime there are this many moving parts, most of which are new, there is a need to develop a strategic plan, if you will, sort of a spine of the organization that helps to align the work, the structure, and ultimately the investments. And so what you have before you is the first reading of that effort. There are 3 things that I want to mention about this presentation very quickly. And I'll take you through the first portion of it, and then as we get to the second portion, I'll introduce the 2 people here at the table to complete the presentation. The first thing you should be aware of is that the document speaks to the needs and the work that both community colleges and higher education will do in a P20 context. It does not in any way omit them from this work. There may be perhaps less references to them. That is only because much of the work that we actually embodied by virtue of the original objectives really involved higher ed at the governance side of the equation, and then some of the operational work was much more community college and pre-K 12 specific. So if you see it heavily loaded on that end, it has to do with that sort of initial scope of work. Second thing I would call to your attention is that this is really what we're calling essentially a 3-year strategic plan, but I reference in here years 4, 5, 6, and 7. You'll hear me talk about a strategic plan that now contemplates some of the work going out as far as 7 more years. And the reason for that was that as we got in and began to actually unpack a lot of the objectives that were originally set as I came on board, a lot of that work actually is likely to fall into one biennium, the biennium that we're about to go into now, 13-15, but it also is going to fall into, if we're continuing the work, it will fall into the second biennium, that is to say, 15-17 as well. And to not identify it would have been really wrong in not being able to give you a sense that this work continues. So even though it is a 3-year strategic plan, it does contemplate work going out as far as 7 more years. But for operational purposes, we really think that the 3-year start place is where we wanted to pitch this conversation. The third thing that I would call to your attention is that there are a number of documents or pages in this presentation that you have seen before. When I first came on board, you may recall that I said that I would do a strategic plan, and that in the course of doing that, I gave you both an outline of what it would look like, how it would flow, when and how these items would be coming before the board. And the last time we actually had this conversation, it was to simply suggest that now, having gone through all the preliminary first steps of the development of the plan, we really needed to concentrate on the metrics. And so you have in front of you a set of metrics that reflect the work that, as I said, every unit, every department head in my staff, and really people across the entire P20 spectrum have made a huge contribution to being able to do this. So with that, or those caveats, let me just kind of go in through this, and I'll be very quick in my portion of this because I really think that we want to get to the metrics and sort of really have that conversation, because that really represents the newest portion of this. So if you could, Seth, give me the slide 3, or page 3 rather. Yeah. So this is where we started some months ago. Actually, there were parts of it that actually, in fact, were in this very room. And I laid out for you what essentially would be the structure of our work in the building of the strategic plan. You'll note that it has all of the component parts of the strategic plan, and by the way, these parts would be alive and well as we go through all the way down to the performance objectives of members of staff and the obvious budget and investment implications, and it will be this way ad infinitum. I mean, at least as long as, I don't want to test fate here, but as long as I'm allowed to do this work, this is the way that I would actually want to proceed. Won't go through it all now because, as I say, you have seen that. If you go to the next slide, the governor's vision essentially is what initially gave us the anchor pins, if you will, for the language around some of the initial indicators, and you may remember that slide as well. And then there was a vision statement, which we sort of work on over 1 or 2 meetings in the late summer, early summer, late summer. And I made a change to this because it really does reflect some of the language that we've now gotten more comfortable using. This is a very small change, but very significant in terms of its meaning. You'll note that I've used the word mid frame there. I've used the word invest in, align and build the P20 system, etc. The word invest did not appear in the other, in the original vision statement that had been approved by the board. So be aware that that really does constitute a change. Again, not a significant one, but big enough that I did want to make sure that I called it to your attention. If you'll go then to the next page 7. And it's here that I start to at least foreshadow the idea that there will be an OEIB focus of the work over the course of the next 7 years, even though this first 3 years is how we are actually beginning to frame our strategic plan. What I did was to essentially just try to continue much of the work that you saw embedded in the original plan, but I simply moved it out, if you will, for to a total of 7 years. And you'll note that the categories of work that are there, the categories of work that are there are categories that in many ways are very consistent with the work that we've already begun. You'll note that some of this is largely because we needed to basically say that the work, even if we actually started it in the current academic year, we wouldn't ever really think about finishing it in 3 years. I mean, it's just not likely that this is going to happen and it's going to all be finished in 3 years. So really, this goes out to essentially say this is about continuity of the work. It's about people feeling as though and seeing that there are very few pivots here. If in fact we get to the data and we see that we've actually realized and completed or accomplished some of these things, then obviously many of these or whatever category might change in nature, or the scope of it might change. But again, just be aware that this kind of just puts a pin in the notion that don't think about this in 3-year segments, think about this in 2 biennium, because we're really going to be talking about investments that we have to continue to make in order to be able to resolve many of the issues that are there. This next section then speaks specifically to the objectives, and you'll again maybe remember many of these things from the documents that you received many months ago. The design and implement a P20 structure, the design and implement initiatives to improve student achievement, affect policies for initiatives and loose, tight direction, create outcomes-based budget and align to the initiatives, and then build an informed and engaged public. Those initiatives are where this whole thing began, and you'll see, again, all of the outcomes that were at that time expressed at a pretty high level relative to those specific objectives. Our quest was to then get this down further so that it now becomes fully operational. It is built into the metrics not only of the system that you'll be monitoring as a board, but it's also built into the structure of our continuous use and performance of members of the staff. And so as we get through the metrics, I'm going to introduce Whitney Ruggs. Of course, you know already. Whitney has a chief role in helping to do this work, along with a person with whom I've had many, many years of wonderful work experience, Carolyn Spate. Carolyn is consulting with me on this project and is a person with whom, goodness, I can go back all the way back to San Francisco, to the Stubbsky Foundation, to more recently our work together in Miami, where Carolyn was the Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources and did all the strategic planning for Miami-Dade County Public Schools. So, having introduced these two people, I'm now going to turn it over to them and ask that you take us through the metrics.
Great. Thank you, Rudy. Good afternoon, board. I'll try to go as quickly as Rudy did. He did an amazing job just winging through here, so we'll do the same thing, and then we can have time for discussion around the various metrics. So the first slide you're looking at are the metrics for Objective 1. The first objective is really around creating the P20 structure, and these the metrics that you'll see here are primarily process metrics. Whether or not we actually went ahead and developed and implemented a aligned P20 system. So the pieces of that are the standards and assessments, the longitudinal data system, and whether or not the work of the subcommittee that Matt and others worked on of developing a governance plan, whether or not that work goes forward is this metric. Then if we want to look at objective 2, this is where we really get into the meat of the strategic initiatives that you're all familiar with, and attempt to look at, if we are to successfully implement these initiatives, what are the changes we're going to see happen for Oregon's students? What are the on-the-ground changes? So the first initiative is the Early Learning and Literacy Initiative. And the metrics we've identified here are increasing the number of children that are entering kindergarten ready to learn by 20%. You'll see that one has a star by it. This is because we don't have the baseline data, as you know, from serving on this board. The kindergarten readiness assessment is being piloted currently and will be launched across the state next fall. We intend to continue to launch that, collect the data, and then look at what a realistic target would be as we move forward. Number of third graders reading at grade level increasing by 15%, and the achievement gap decreasing by 5%. Do you want to talk through the data, or do you want me to?
Oh, go ahead. You're fine.
Yeah, okay. We have, if we want to just take a look real quick at, hard to see, but this should be in front of you. Yeah. So this is the taken from the Oregon State report card. It'll give you an idea of where we are currently in the 2011-12 school year in terms of third grade reading, and looking at what are the sort of largest achievement gaps, what are the how are all students performing. And in looking at this data and looking at the specific initiatives that we're proposing around reading, looking at the gains that some districts have made over time in implementing many of these initiatives, we set a 15% increase over the course of the next 3 years. So that would be measured at the end of the 14-15 school year, as well as a decrease in achievement gaps at all of these subgroup levels by 5%. Thanks. Back to the slides. And the last metric on this, which is, I think, very important and something that we don't always bring to this level, which is the number of underserved families who engage meaningfully in their child's education is no less than half. Again, we don't have a baseline for this data, but I think by collecting the data and asking the question, how many of our families are truly feel engaged in their child's education, and what can we do to increase that number across the state so that we have no less than half of our families really feeling like they are a part of the system, I think is a very powerful metric. The next initiative is the diverse core of educators, and the measurements that we've listed there are based in part on some of the data that's already being collected, or things we think we can get without too much problem. The first metric is the number of education professionals projected to enter our workforce within 2 years who are non-white, Hispanic, or whose native language is not English. I apologize, the first copy you received carried over the typo that has been popping up in a few things that said non-Hispanic. So the increase we're looking for is a 10% increase in those educators over the course of this period. The next metric, level of employer satisfaction with new teachers prepared in Oregon, increases by 30%. Again, there's an asterisk. We are making a guess about what a valid increase might be without having baseline data. So these are places where we would want to come back to the board with the baseline data and have a conversation about what kind of goal we want to set for the board. But we've plugged in numbers just to begin that conversation. And the last one, at least 30% more educators report increased satisfaction in professional support. Again, no baseline data, but thought it was important if we're talking about supporting educators that we're really beginning to ask them what it means to feel supported and whether or not the working conditions that we're creating in Oregon are such that they can accomplish the goals that we're putting in front of them.
If I could just parenthetically just point out that below that box, you'll note that the word key strategies is there. please assume that those strategies are the things that we are currently working on right now. This is the work in the pipeline. It is the work that we ultimately began to not just thread into the work we're doing, but it's really the work we're ultimately beginning to cascade into other departments and other units across the P20 spectrum. It's the work that we're beginning to engage community about already. It's the work that ultimately went into the development of the initiatives that went before the governor, and that he has now baked into his own budget recommendations to the legislature. So as you see, the idea, for example, or the concept of 4 to 6 professional development centers, that is a strategy designed to produce this particular objective. So I just want to make sure you're aware to see that.
Dr. Bruce, since there's a break, I'd like to go back to page 14 and ask you if you have a working definition for underserved families.
This is, we have tried to align most of these metrics with the Achievement Compact and roll in the discussions and definitions that were created in that process. So the underserved categories would be the same categories that we're using in the compact to disaggregate the data and goal setting.
Thank you.
And thank you, Dr. Kerr, for pointing out the strategies. I was so focused on the metrics that I forgot. But yes, we've tried to develop them in context of the strategies we're moving forward. So now I'm on, I think, 16. Yeah. Connecting to the World of Work initiative. This is the STEM 11 to 14 redesign, connecting more intentionally with employers in Oregon, trade unions, career, integrating arts. The metrics we've set are number of students who demonstrate proficiency in math and science in middle school increases 15% and achievement gap decreases 5%. We can quickly take a look at that. Yeah, here we go. We have math here laid out for you in a similar fashion, showing where we are with all students and then where we are with each subgroup, and an attempt to kind of sketch out what the achievement gap is currently. If you want to look at the next one, it's science. As you'll see here, some of the achievement gap issues in math and science in middle school are the largest that we face in our state. So while the 15% increase is very robust, seemed to speak to the urgency of really beginning to get our students of our state on a path to being able to be college and career ready.
If I may, there have been a number of queries when we were initially talking about the initiatives themselves. And those queries were around this question of, in effect, why these areas? Why would you focus on STEM? Why the focus on literacy? Why the focus on teaching and developing of a core of stronger and more supported professionals? I don't want to go through this data point by point, but there is no way to get to 40-40-20 without attacking in a very rigorous way these gaps that you see here. And so it is going to, by very definition of the work plan here, it is going to force us to think in terms of all kids in the system, all kids, all young people, if you will, in the state. All of those young people in those graphs will migrate, if you will, to a 2 or a 4 year collegiate experience, or they will migrate directly into the world of work. And the question is, with what level of preparation in math, in reading, and in science? And if we don't attack it, if we don't do something about it, if we don't focus on it, if we don't invest in it, then clearly all bets are off with respect to 40-40-20. And so this, without being maudlin about it, this was a way of trying to say as clearly as we could early on in our tenure here, you can't do the work of 40-40-20. You can't have a goal of 40-40-20 and not attack this with some degree of real creativity, innovation, sort of breakneck speed, because if you don't, 2025 will be here and the same failure rates will be upon us, the same distance in the gaps will be upon us. And some of this, to be perfectly honest with you, is in my judgment, humbly said, nearly, this is not the first year of this. This isn't like this is a cohort. You could go back arguably several years, and you would see these same gaps have existed. So when people have brought the question of, well, things were better when we had more money, well, I guess I would say better for whom? Because this has been around for a very long time. And this isn't to castigate anybody, anybody's organization, anybody's vision, anybody's institution or anything else. This is just simply saying, as a P20 body, we now have the opportunity to lift all of those bars, at the same time close this achievement gap, however devilish it may be and however difficult it may be from the standpoint of funding and logistics. So, if you hear this getting to be a more spirited debate, I'd just like you to keep this frame of reference in your mind for both for reading, third grade reading, for fifth grade math, and for eighth grade science. The state will not be able to move people to a 40-40-20 status unless this gets substantially remade.
Yeah. I realize there's an asterisk by the second bullet on the 9 or more credits,
Yes.
but I'm still wondering, we went around the state and listened to, especially the rural communities, share their challenges around offering different courses to our students because they didn't have the ability to offer them. So we're looking at setting targets for that to increase, and at least 50% of our students having 9 or more college credits. Have we talked with educators, administrators, to know at all where we are right now, or did we just make a number up here?
Again, we don't have a baseline for this one that's firmly established. We should by the time they submit the next achievement compacts, and so this is not based on anything other than a guess of what might be a sort of 40-40-20 path would look like. But I will add that in the conversation that we're having, that the best practices subcommittee is having around regional achievement compacts, this kind of discussion, I think, is exactly what we're trying to incent. So if there are not opportunities for students in a region to access college credit, that can be brought to the table, and that not only can it be brought to the table, but solutions can be found among a region so that we're incenting community colleges and universities to really open their doors and become part of the solution and really drive that kind of improvement for our high school students across the state. So I think I hear what you're saying. Definitely, if we don't have baseline data, we can't really set a target that's meaningful. And so I think once we have the baseline data, we will definitely need to come back. And then the examination of those barriers, I think, is really part of the conversation that this board will be driving over the course of the strategic plan period.
And I would say the disinvestment has caused our districts and our school boards to have to make very difficult decisions about cutting electives, about raising class size up where they have, and I'm not sure that isn't part of where we are today.
Thank you. So we can go back to you're back. You read my mind. So as Hannah mentioned, the next metric is about the 9+ college credits. Again, following from the Achievement Compact as an important indicator of not only high school success, but college enrollment and completion is really improved by improving the number of college credits students earn in high school. The next metric is that at least 85% of students who graduate from Oregon's education system would be employed within 12 months. Data collection here, again, is challenging, but this is another spot where it really compels us as a state to look at data collection across agencies and to look at data collection along the entire continuum, including into employment, and that this will be a crucial sort of metric for not only achieving the growth that we talk about here, but a crucial metric for just getting the data in place and getting us all aligned as to what it is we're working with.
I'm sorry, on this one, we had talked about, and we had the Labor Department come in and talk to us about what we needed to do as far as educating students to have jobs that were appropriate for their level of education. So when we're looking at this 85% will be employed, is that employed at the level that's appropriate for their education? So if we help them get to a degree, are we going to have here in Oregon, are we going to have a job that they're going to go out into and be able to use those skills and be able to frankly pay back their student loans that they've had to take out in order to get there? Are we looking at appropriate placement, or are we just saying, you've got a job?
So the way that we looked at this particular metric was, it is going to cause us to build the infrastructure around both job creation, i.e. within the economy of Oregon, and to then create the nexus between jobs that are now going to be available and how students from Oregon institutions then access those jobs. Both pieces are going to be important here. It's about job development and about, in many cases, creating, if you will, opportunities for new and different industries to emerge and to demonstrate that they have jobs coming into the state. But it's also about our ability to then connect young people to the jobs that are then available. Absent both of those things, the answer to your question would be no. People might be taking jobs for which they are really underemployed, and that's not how we're situating this. This is basically saying, do economic development and educational preparation, and then connect the two.
So just for a process that we're going to use, as the presentation goes on, it's great to ask questions, and then at the end, we're going to leave time to hear from all of the board to get a sense. So do you have a question, David?
I'll wait.
Okay. We'll start with you when we go around.
And on just finishing up on the connecting to the world of work, as Dr. Crew just mentioned, the strategies here really are around creating those opportunities to connect, to connect job development with education and the economy. So turning to counseling and support for post-secondary aspirations, the metrics that have been selected here or for discussion. At least 75% of students will be on track for graduation by the end of 9th grade with no gaps greater than 10%. Again, similar to other metrics, this is one where the baseline data is still being developed. Districts have become comfortable with looking at what it means to be on track in 9th grade, but we're still sort of getting it across the state so that we can have a baseline we can set a goal from. The next metric, 5-year cohort graduation rate increases 5 percentage points and achievement gap decreases 5%. Do you want to show the, oh, we don't have that one, never mind. I think most folks are a little more familiar with the 5-year cohort graduation rate. Our rate for all students last year, we haven't received this year's data yet, but last year was 71%. With some significant gaps, 30% in some subgroups. The next metric would be post-secondary enrollment of underserved students, again using the categories that we've looked at before, increasing collectively the underserved student enrollment in post-secondary by 10 percentage points. The key strategies on this that you've seen as you looked at the different strategic initiatives are really looking at at supports at those transition times between middle school and high school, transition between high school and community college or university, really looking at our students who are at risk or our students who've been disengaged from the system and focusing on getting them the kinds of support, mentoring, counseling, connecting them to the sort of idea that 40-40-20 is a goal for them as well. So these are the strategies here. The next objective, now we're shifting kind of out of our strategic initiatives, and we're looking at the OEIB initiative of shifting systems and cultures to address equity and results in learning environments that address the needs of all learners. This is the work of the equity subcommittee, looking closely at developing a framework that we can use across the state to ensure that we're looking at equity. The metrics here are focused, again, on things that the Achievement Compact has drawn our attention to. The first metric is that at least 75% of our priority and focus schools, if you recall, this is the designation of schools that are most struggling in the state, or schools that are struggling most with overall achievement or with issues in underserved student performance. That 75% of those schools will achieve growth for all students and subgroups greater than the state average. This metric is a little bit wonky, and unless you're up to your eyeballs in this like I am, but it really is meant to say that in these schools that are struggling, we want to measure how fast they're growing their students. So we've developed this new report card that really looks at the growth of students, because in some cases students are starting very far behind, and we really want to look at that acceleration pattern. So this is saying we want in those buildings, our goal is that students will be growing faster than students across the state. So they're demonstrating that kind of growth. The next metric is specifically around 5th grade reading for English language learners. I think we have a slide that looks a little bit different. It's looking at both somewhat at current performance and something at the target that we're trying to set here. So the target would be that this is the only place where we have a target that's not a percentage point target, but it's a certain percentage of students that will demonstrate an increase. So if you look over on the left, the two bars there attempt to represent the same cohort of students. If you're a data purist, you know that it's not exactly a cohort, but we've looked at the performance of 3rd grade English language learners in 2009-10, and then we've looked at the performance of what would be the same class when they're in 5th grade of English language learners in 2011-12. Really, again, this is not meant to be a direct correlation, but to demonstrate that not only are we having really struggling, we have a lot of English language learners who are struggling to achieve benchmark, but we have a pattern of it even going down as they progress across the system. So the target that we've set is really about the number of students that we can really engage and move to benchmark in the next few years. So the target for 2014-15 is to improve the number of students by 75%, which would result in 37% of English language learners reading at benchmark in 5th grade. We went out even further because it was, Dr. Crew will address, it was heartbreaking to even see 37% be a goal. And so we've set a 5-year out target for 2017-18 of 64%, which would be another 75% increase in the number of students who are meeting proficiency.
This is an area where we should just be quietly, painfully reflective, because essentially what it says is, and I saw this sort of as we came in the door, is that the longer some students stay with us, the worse they do. they regress. And that regression is not across the board. That's not every district, that's not every child, and certainly it's not every family or every community, but it's sufficiently large in scope and in number, an actual number, that what you see in aggregate is a cohort, a reasonable shot at a cohort from 3rd to 5th grade, and a loss in their achievement, in their overall performance in terms of reading. Now, if you carry that conversation, I'll get to the latter two bars in a moment, but if you carry that conversation forward and just lived within the current structure of the compact conversations, and you just simply said, well, listen, those kids are going to go somewhere. Where will they go? Well, largely they won't graduate. Largely they'll also fit into the increased numbers of kids for whom graduation is absolutely implausible. And then someone will eventually come in and we'll do a report on, who is it that gets expelled or suspended in greater numbers. And they'll fit in that category as well. And then we'll do a study, or we'll begin to look at the numbers of kids who matriculated to a 2- or 4-year institution, and that body of youngster will fit largely into the category of didn't make it into those 2- or 4-year institutions. To intercept that, just be perfectly frank, to intercept that is what the work, in part, I won't say all of it, but largely is going to have to be. If we want to take a bite out of that, if we are serious about that, it is going to mean policy reformation, it will mean practice differences, it will mean real accountability for this, it will mean real training and real support for people trying to do this, and most critically, it will mean real investment of dollars and time and effort and people and human resource to get this done. And critically, it's going to mean that we actually have to start, when you think about this as a 3rd and 5th grade cohort, this really has a huge implication for what does it look like at early learning stages, right? So it just portends so much of the work, and it's a sad state of affairs when you think about youngsters being in the system and it's a regressive system for them. And then when you even begin to try to turn it around, which this chart begins to say we can do, you turn it around, realistically, a 75% jump is enormous. It's an enormous statistical body of, it's very hard to do. But I dared not put anything less than that, to be perfectly honest with you, or it undermines our very spirit of what this work is really about. So that's why I went out to the next cohort, or the next biennium, really, to say at least by that time we would have essentially gotten ourselves into something of a more respectable performance indicator for this particular subgroup.
Nicole, okay, Nicole.
And I apologize if this actually comes somewhere different in the strategic plan and I'm just missing it, but it also seems like some really clear outcomes in our strategic plan around early childhood are needed. I am a firm believer that our achievement gap actually starts in early childhood because we currently don't have a system that serves Latino, Native American, and English language learners very well. And in fact, many of our most vulnerable, poor families from rural areas and marginalized groups are the least likely to get those services. And it seems like, particularly in this area, around English language learners, and for really communities of color and rural communities, we should have some very explicit goals about better representation of services. And then, since I have the microphone, I will also mention that we have many districts that are very much out of federal compliance with our special education laws because we have such gross overrepresentation of children of color. And we have, from what I can tell, no really explicit goals around that, and that seems really important to add.
Well, Nicole, you can see people are taking notes, and part of this process is just to get those additional thoughts. Okay, so Hannah?
So I'm trying to understand the data that you've given us here that you have up on the screen. You said that this isn't a cohort. We don't know that these are the same students. I'm trying to understand that drop of 9%. So are these the same students that were 30% in 3rd grade and now 21? Or is this the students that were in third grade and then the students who were in fifth grade, because we have a large transition with our students. And I just want to understand, this is not acceptable in any way, but I want to make sure when we look at data that we're looking and explaining the data in a way that everyone understands exactly what it is.
Right. And it's not a pure cohort. It's not the same students. It's looking at, because English language learners may have exited from the program, others may have joined, students may have moved into the state, students may have moved out. So this is looking at the students that were tested in third grade in 2009-10 that were identified as English language learners. This is the results. And then in fifth grade in 2000, whatever it is, 11-12. So there are probably students that are the same in that cohort, and then there are ones that are different. So the comparison was really more just about looking at where were we, a few years ago at third grade and where are we last year at fifth grade. It's a closer comparison than looking at two fifth grade classes or two, third this year and fifth this year. It's a little bit closer, but it's not a pure cohort, you're right.
Okay,
Yeah.
so if you look at the 9-10 ELPA test and the 11-12 ELPA test, was there any significant change in that?
That's a good question. I haven't looked at that.
Okay. Anybody else before we continue?
Okay, so we'll move on to really we come to some metrics that are again more about OEIB fulfilling its role and achieving process things or outcomes that it has said it will do. The next initiative is around the accountability system, and the metrics that are represented here are about really using the data that we get from the accountability system to affect policy and change practice. How we measure that is still an open question, but really we wanted the metric to be about not only collecting data and holding folks accountable, but really using the accountability system to change the way business is done in Oregon so that you're taking the data and making it actionable. The next metric, at least 80% of educators, students, and families surveyed report the accountability system as useful. Again, we would need baseline data and to develop a plan for gathering that, but the work that we're doing with the Achievement Compact and engaging families, and the work we're doing with the Oregon report card redesign, which is really about making sure that what we're putting out there is understandable and useful by students and families, so that data is not just collected for data purposes, but is actually something that can help students and families improve in the system. The next initiative has to do with the return on investment. This is in Senate Bill 909, one of the directives to this board was to begin looking at how our initiatives, the return on investment for each of the initiatives that are established, and this is a process outcome that says we will in fact look at the impact of the initiatives and the return on investment and use that information to develop, as we move forward, to develop new strategic initiatives. We'll actually be using the data on how the current strategic initiatives move the dial and know sort of what the cost impact was of those. I'm getting close to done. The next set is really around policies, and we don't need to go through these because it's just a set of areas that we've identified as focuses for the kinds of policies that OEIB and the state agencies are looking at around ESD, workforce, 11 to 14, removing barriers, equity, the pieces of policy that need to be put in place for early learning, diplomas and credentials, and then continuing the mandate relief work that's been started. The fourth objective is around outcomes-based budget. And again, this just says that we will have a strategic plan, we will have metrics, we will analyze them and improve them, update them annually. And that our budget, the budget recommendations that OEIB develops will be aligned to strategic initiatives and outcomes and delivered on time. Okay, let's see, we're getting very close. One more objective, which is work to build an informed, motivated, and engaged public. These metrics are, again, about how we engage stakeholders in a two-way conversation. So not only how do we ensure that the OEIB's work is widely understood by the field, but also that we are receiving the feedback that they have to offer at all points about the work. There is a metric around regional achievement compacts. We have stated it as 100% of regions will report having business and community partners engaged in meeting the achievement compact goals. This is the conversation about opening up achievement compacts to include community partners, businesses, families, and others so that they become more of a shared responsibility model than something where we are putting all accountability on our institutions. So this is a conversation that will be continuing over the next six months or more. And the last metric there, 85% of education institutions report that the created tools and processes have been useful to them and engage in their communities. So that's to say the work that the OEIB does in creating regional compacts and processes around that are actually useful to the communities in the field that are implementing them.
Thank you. So first, I do want to point out that this is a first reading, which means that the purpose here today is to get familiar with the strategic plan. We also got it ahead of time, but to really hear from people. I know our presenters have been taking down notes of what they've already heard. But now I'd like us just to, and we're going to start with David, because I promised, just go around and hear from each of the members, realizing we have these short runways around your comments about this.
Okay, I'll just start out with my general impression, and then I've got 3 points I did have some questions on. I think this is a very good proposal. I like the direction it's going in, particularly that the key strategies are focusing on closing the achievement gap in many cases and underserved students, non-native speakers. I think that's a real good focus we've talked about in the past, but I like it's really coming to the forefront here, and I think that's good. I think it's also good that we're talking about metrics for the Oregon Education Investment Board, because up to now we've been concentrating a lot on achievement compacts and school districts, colleges, universities, you're going to do this, and kind of the end of the subject. And we really need some metrics for ourselves. In fact, I think we should have started off with this, and it probably would have been better all the way around. But I think that's a good sign. We certainly have a lot of work to do on the strategies, and I want to make sure this board and the appropriate committees are involved in that, because my questions really relate to three particular things about the key strategies. One in page, I think, 15, it's also on page 20, the professional core of educators, talking about new licensure requirements or processes, and I just want to make sure we're involved with that, or the other appropriate boards too, the licensing boards and of course the universities offering with schools of education are involved in that. So I'd like to make sure that's an inclusive process, because there are lots of proposals out there nationwide. I think some good, I think some not so good, and I want to make sure that it's really something that the entire education system of Oregon can really buy into. So I'd like to just make sure that's going to be the point with any change in licensure. I really like there's like on page 15, 19, 22, for example, there's a lot of things about getting input from the public and the education community. Does the education community, the institutions think this is a useful accountability system? I think that's good. Are educators satisfied with professional support? Do stakeholders feel engaged? I think these are really good things that have been missing in a lot of our conversation up to now. And we really do have to get more of this kind of qualitative data. And on that point, my final point is I really do have an issue with, on page, I think it was 16, that graduates are employed within 12 months. I really admire the goals of connecting job development with education, making that link there. But I don't think that's the right metric we want to be using. Now, if you're talking about employability or skills level, or I think even more in line with some of the other qualitative things we had, like employee satisfaction with the skills people have learned or their employability, I think that may be better, but I just think it's a very tenuous link between how many people are working and who's come out of, who's graduated from schools, whether it's high school or university. So I don't think that's the same connection we want when we're talking about driving the economy and job development.
So we're just going to take input now, and the team will work on it, and it will be brought back as second reading. What I'm going to ask is that this is an additive process, meaning we're just going to assume you're agreeing with everything. If there's something you feel differently, say it, or if there's any additional information, just because of time and good process. So, any additional comments?
I know we've talked about several of these things, and I'm assuming you just want us to go up the matrix now. You don't want us to start at the beginning with the overview and the vision. Did you want us just to do the metrics right now?
Whatever comments about the strategic plan, but
This whole document?
yeah, just
Okay.
any input for the writing team.
One of the things I shared about this board is I don't think we have a lot of conversations. I don't think we've discussed a lot of what's embedded in this document to the degree where we can really articulate what it looks like and be able to say that, yes, we were part of creating this. On the page 3, it talks about the guiding principles. So at this point, what are our guiding principles? What have we agreed to are guiding principles for all of the work that we do? And I think that's an important step as we're moving forward. And one of the things that I believe is important, serving on this board, is that we listen to parents, students, and educators about what it is they believe is important for the P through 20 system. How can we design it if we haven't really had those conversations? We went out. We had the forums across the state. I don't see a whole lot of what we heard from the forums embedded in this yet. And I would hope that we would continue to build on that and make sure that we've at least talked about those things that are important. If we look at the vision statement, I know we've talked about this. I don't believe we've adopted the vision statement. Have we?
Yes.
Yeah.
We had a couple of conversations about it before we adopted.
We had a couple of conversations. I don't recall, the last time I remember seeing it, we made some edits, but we did not adopt it, which I go back to, if this is about us being able to really engage the public, if you held this up and you said this is our vision, I have a hard time believing that the majority of Oregonians would be excited about the work that we're doing and believe that this is what public education is all about. The conundrum, it's really language, and we talked earlier when we very first started with Oregon Learns, that the language in that document needs to be a language that people understand and that it's meaningful to them. So if we did adopt it, I apologize, but I'd like to see where we did adopt that. I think there are a lot of work has gone into this. I understand that we don't have a lot of baseline data. Again, we continue to move fast and talk about adding things later. And when we do that, I think it gets in the way of being strategic and intentional about some of the work that's important for us to do. So I have questions. I have quite a few questions, and I'm happy to take those offline with the staff who's working on it. Or I believe it would be great to have us really sit down where we have some dedicated time that we can talk about and understand why the numbers are put in there that are the placeholders, and what is our guiding principle to help make sure that those numbers, when they ultimately get in there, are ones that this board.
Hannah, what I'm going to do, is just so other people can have an opportunity, because we do have some time limits, is thank you for taking that offline. We'll just go around, second, in between, we'll talk about how to respond to people, and then if we have more time, we'll come back. We already are off time a little bit, so Matt, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, Madam Chair, just if I may, at some point, I would really like for us to have some meaningful time to have conversations for this board about the issues that come forward. We received this on Friday, late afternoon. We've had a small amount of time. There is stuff that we've seen before, but there's significant changes. And I would like for us to be respectful of the role that we're playing in this work, to set aside enough time to have meaningful conversations.
Thank you for your input. Matt?
Thank you. I have a quick question for Whitney and then just 3 comments. Just a quick question on the logic of, first of all, I think it's a really nice document. I appreciate the work you went into it. Just to make sure I understand the logic. On page 19, we stop listing key strategies in the bottom right. And I just want to make sure I understood the logic that I think Dr. Cruz said. The key strategies are strategies that are already underway. So is there some logical implication that from page 19 on, there are no key strategies that are currently underway?
Hi, good afternoon, board. That's just for a matter of time and space. We have key strategies. We have actually quite a bit more detail under this document as well, because each of the units and agencies were deeply involved in this. And so for each one of these initiatives and metrics, we do have key strategies, which I'm happy to forward to the full board to read.
That's helpful. The reason for that first question is, one of the things that strikes me as I take a step back from this is a lot to do. And I think even just through page 18, I count 24 key strategies. And then I would imagine a lot more detail. So the question, one question, or comment just becomes one of prioritization, without even knowing, to Hannah's point, whether these are the right fill-in-the-blank percentages and so forth. I would like to have some better understanding of prioritization, even without a formal ROI methodology that's been adopted by the board, which I understand we don't have that yet. I'd like to know what are the 5 must-haves out of these 24 and whatever else. And I think that would be good for the board to also just have as a bit of a dashboard to be really thinking about, what are the 3 to 5 places where we're really moving the needle, where the costs are the lowest and the benefits are the highest. So that's just one comment. Second comment, and this is really to Dr. Crew, is trying to build a link between the strategic plan and the exercise that my committee just went through, which is really trying to think about capacity building for this board. So just several points through the document, I was thinking about how do we then distribute and assign these outcomes and objectives to this board. And also build out the OEID org chart and so forth. So I think in terms of a strategic plan, which I understand is strategic and not tactical, I do start thinking about implementation and therefore capacity to execute. And somewhere, Dr. Crew, I'd like to, in the next 6-month plan, to really see that bridge being built. So that's the second comment. And the third comment is also a little bit more execution oriented, and it's, when I see a strategic plan, I immediately start thinking about looking ahead to a performance review where you're reviewing yourself against the strategic plan. And what I found myself doing, which I think is to be expected, was I was confounding some of the state's performance versus the individual or marginal performance of this board. And I think the document does a great job of talking about where the state wants to go. I found myself a little less able to say, okay, a year from now, 2 years from now, how will we measure the marginal contribution of this entity in your staff? And so it's linked to the capacity building point, but I would really like to be able to, again, anticipate a performance review of this board and say, how are we doing? Are we moving the needle? And to think about how we can measure our own performance.
So we're going to continue. I think this is very important, and I'm going to make a few comments. Then we'll go to people on the phone, and then we'll get to Don. First of all, I really thank you for this document. We've talked about a lot of things. This starts putting it together, makes it so that we can really start doing all the things you've talked about, Matt. So I really appreciate it. I think it's tremendous work. The second thing is, Hannah, when you talk about going around the state, and I agree with you, we heard a lot of stuff. I think that's half the formula. The other is we're in a leadership position where we need to listen to what people say and understand that some people haven't been in all these meetings, heard all the things we're looking at, and then we have to filter it and say, based on all the things we heard, how are we going to lead to really making a difference in the lives of kids? So I have to say, I want to really focus on our role as leaders. It goes right with what you're saying, Matt. We need to be held accountable about the lives of the kids in this state and moving the dial on achievement. So I think if you take input with leadership and our accountability, I really think we can make a big difference. And this really helps us on a pathway to do it. So I really appreciate that. So people on the phone, Mary, are you there? Anybody on the phone?
Yeah, this is Mark.
Oh, okay, Mark.
I'm sorry if I'm jumping over Mary. I just didn't hear her come in. Just reiterating a lot of what I already said. I think Matt landed on something that was going across my mind, the sheer volume of the metrics. And we know what gets measured gets done, but when we fragment ourselves too many, it's hard to keep a focus. So I think that's a challenge we need to face. And how does that align clearly? I would love to see us start landing on common terms and common metrics. Meaning, if we're talking return on investment, we say the number one is third grade literacy. And then that third grade literacy is the term that we use, whether it's the achievement compact, whether it's in the strategic plan, whether it's in any other document that comes out of the investment board. So I think we definitely are on the right track. I'll reiterate what everyone said, appreciate the quality, Whitney as well, the quality you put into this. I think we're on the right area to go for is how do we make it meaningful, how do we prioritize within that document. And finally, I heard Hannah's comment about us having process time. I've been thinking back to our retreat a year ago where, our strategic plan before Rudy was hired was kind of all over the place, a little frustrating. And I'm just thinking, if we can plan a retreat, or maybe, a retreat to different parts of the year where we do nothing but look at the strategic plan, that might allow for some of that dialogue that should be pretty good.
Thank you. Is there anyone else on the phone?
Yes, Julia.
Hi, Julia.
I had a couple of comments. I think on the vision, I don't recall the adoption, or if we have that discussion, it seems like we made changes to it. So I'd want to have a deeper discussion because I do think that's the frame of it, the lens through which most people will view our work. And if it's not accessible to parents, the students, the community, then I think we miss a big opportunity to invite or deeper engagement into our work. Then on, I'm just going to some specific points, the longitudinal data system that's referenced on page 13, it talks about serving the end users, and many discussions we've had about the longitudinal data, because I'm not clear who the end user is. So I'd want more clarity of the purpose of that data system and who we view as the end user. This next comment is more focused on the sort of broader document that I think we need to go a little bit deeper on the sort of of things. I see a lot of metrics and strategies around an objective for the early learning and some pretty specific measures in the sort of K-12, but we want to have a drill down more on the community colleges and university pieces, like how will we know that we had an impact. We measuring that by readiness, completion. We don't have the same level of depth for post-high school that we do in the pre-university, pre-community college. And then my last comment is, let's see, a more general one, and I think I would agree with Mark that we would benefit, not that we would make a lot of significant changes, but having the opportunity to have a longer discussion versus everybody just sharing a point of view on the document so that we all feel a sense of deeper ownership and an understanding of what it is that we're approving and what the implications of that are. So I think, it's a retreat or longer session that lends itself to more interaction among the board members.
Thank you. Is there anybody else on the phone?
Yeah, this is Mary. Just three quick things to build on what Julia, Matt, and Mark said. Focus, I mean, it's a lot, and I think some priorities would be important. Secondly, the post-secondary piece, and I think I came on the call just as Rudy was saying something about post-secondary, but I didn't catch all of it. But this feels like a K-12 plan, and if we really want to build out the 0 to 20 system, I think it needs to be a little more detailed on the post-secondary side. And then lastly, the time to discuss, because this is going to guide our work, not only our work, but the work of practitioners in the field. And I think it deserves a more iterative conversation where we can really consider the different points of view of the board members and staff and talk about bringing those to conclusion.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anybody else on the phone?
Nancy, it's Ron. I'm here too.
Okay, good.
And I won't prolong things. Everything I wanted to say has been said, but I do want to go back to something Matt started with, which is just to express appreciation for a good work product. I understand everybody wants to have their input here, but this kind of thing really takes somebody taking a step forward with a draft. I thought this was very well done. Thank you.
Okay. Yvonne?
And my comment is similar to that in that I just appreciate all the work that went into it, and your comments, Nancy, about the fact that we are a leadership group. And I just want to add one other thing, and that is I realize that we don't have a lot of metrics. Many of us have been frustrated for however many years we've been in the state. For some people it's their whole life, and others almost. That we don't have enough metrics. So when we think we're doing a good job, we don't really know how to go back and measure that. And so even though we know we don't know how to measure them, maybe perhaps now by at least putting a marker there and then letting the team go back and determine maybe we do need to prioritize. If all of those still need metrics to be developed or tools for getting those measures, then we will have to prioritize. The other piece I think that might help in relationship to Matt's comment is if we understand as a board kind of the agencies and the groups taking on this work, perhaps it doesn't look so big because we do have a lot of people working to get this work done, and maybe that's the part that we can't yet see. So I just, I know that it's always a balance, how much information can we share at one time, but I think if there is a way to share that with us, it might help us understand where we can't prioritize because there's a sense of urgency to get so much of this done. It might help us feel more confident that it's going to happen.
Thank you. Okay, we're going right there. Do you want to, are we okay, Kay, with going to you and we'll get to
No, I didn't have a
Sandwich?
question.
Just comments or?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate what was already said, is that it's really high quality work. And many of the issues that I think I'm on this board to address or being addressed. I continue to be concerned about the achievement gap. I want to piggyback on the comment that Nicole made, is that if we focus on early childhood, many of those questions will begin to be answered. I do want to express alarm and concern about the early language learning direction from 3rd grade to 5th grade, and it sounds like there are some strategies to address that, but I think overall it's high quality work. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole.
I'll echo that and call out specifically that I very much appreciate that the majority of the plan is on a 3-year timeline. I think that is fair and appropriate and realistic, so I certainly want to commend you on that. I also want to say that I think it's very critical that this board set ambitious and courageous goals, and that we send the message loud and clear that our children can achieve, and I think these ambitious goals do that, and I think we should lean into that challenge. I won't repeat my 2 earlier comments about special education and early childhood. I took my time earlier. And then I would also just add that while this is a difficult piece to measure, I do think some piece of work around partnership, not just customer satisfaction, but our educational institutions in our state being a real partner in an authentic way with the community is very important. And I think that may lead to somehow also measuring sort of our effectiveness at the leadership level. I know that's a tricky one, but I think that that's such an important area that if we were true partners with the community and they really felt like this educational system belonged to them, we would advance our efforts.
Samuel.
Been waiting for this for 20 years. I'm glad it's here. There's a little bit more work to do on it. I appreciate you taking some of the comments that I brought back from some other states for the work plan for engaging the public, and obviously it's ongoing, but I'm delighted because every moment we wastes a piece of the kid's life, and I'm not happy with that. I'm impatient with it. I know we have to take care of some business, but I think we need to move along.
Thank you. So I think we've heard from all board members. It's certainly given us some good information. So as we go from first reading to second reading and action, we can take the input and help with us moving forward. So that was very, very helpful. Okay, so with that, anything else from the team? I think that's it, right?
Yes.
Thanks for your tremendous work. So we're going to move on. We are a little behind, but I'll do my best to catch us up. And so we're going to start with an action item around achievement compacts. We've had subcommittees who have been working very hard on this work, and I'm going to first, in terms of the K-12 achievement compact, in a minute, turn it over to Yvonne, and I'm sure you'll say this, there's been lots of partners like COSA and OEA, and a lot of us just working together around this, and you're chairing that, so I appreciate that.
So that is what I was going to start with. Again, continuing to appreciate the collaborative manner in which we're working with all the entities in K-12. I think the more we can collaborate and the more we can bring well-vetted and thought-out ideas to this board, it helps us because we don't have a lot of discussion time. However, the way we are running this subcommittee, we are taking, for the most part, in the last few meetings, one topic at a time and leaving plenty of time for discussion of the members. So I invite any of the board members who are maybe not a part of that committee, if you see a topic on our agenda that you want to be involved in the conversation, we invite you to just come sit at the table, even if you're not on the committee itself. We are not a decision-making committee, but we'll bring recommendations. And I feel like the ideas that are coming to us have been very well vetted, thought through. They're not always coming forward to you in exactly the same format they came to us, because we are doing some distilling, and some of the leadership part you are talking about, Nancy, and that there are times we have to listen to many sides and then just make a decision and move forward. Doesn't mean it's done forever. We will continue to revise some of them. So with that, I just want to also thank Mike and Whitney for distilling those ideas and getting them into a really good written format. we are ready to bring forward the recommendations from that committee for the K-12 Achievement Compact for this board to make a decision on today to adopt. So I'm going to ask Whitney and Michael to, well, Whitney's going to share the K-12. I think it makes sense to then make a decision about that and then to go into the regional compact, which Michael will then share. Okay. Whitney?
Thank you. So the subcommittee took recommendations from a lot of different groups and really came to the conclusion that they wanted to leave the K-12 Achievement Compact fairly static for this coming school year, so that the conversations around the Regional Achievement Compact that Michael will talk about can have some room to breathe and grow. So the recommendations for the K-12 Achievement Compact are a fairly short list, and you have it in front of you. The subcommittee recommends adding the kindergarten readiness assessment participation rate. Again, the assessment is being piloted, will be launched next school year, but the participation rate is really our attempt to ensure that districts go ahead and implement that, and it'll begin to give us a better baseline of data. There won't be any results to report, so the participation rate is what the subcommittee is recommending be reported. There is a recommendation to shift the early elementary math indicator from 3rd grade to 5th grade. There is a recommendation to add 8th grade math. There was no academic indicator in middle school, and I think the subcommittee really hoped there could be an academic indicator in addition to the absenteeism indicator, so that's the recommendation. The subcommittee recommends removing the 5-year cohort graduation rate. This is an area where there were 3 measures of graduation: a 4-year cohort, a 5-year cohort, and a 5-year completer. I won't go into the really snoozy details of all of them, but the completer rate measures regular diplomas as well as GEDs, modified and advanced diplomas. It is the measurement that is in the legislation on which 40-40-20 is based. The 5-year cohort rate is the one that the group is recommending remove. We have that information tracked on report cards and in other places. This is an attempt to just focus on the 5-year completer rate and the 4-year cohort rate.
And if I could just add, it is in the completed rate, so it was just duplicated.
Yes.
It was not to change the emphasis on making sure that 5-year graduation rate is important and honored that way.
That's right. The 5-year completer is the most inclusive of the 3. The subcommittee recommends taking the 9th grade on-track indicator, which was a combined indicator last year. This year they're recommending that it be broken down to its 2 elements, which are 9th grade chronic absenteeism and 9th grade credits toward high school completion. This recommendation really just is from the school districts. It's easier to track if it's 2 separate lines, and so we've made that change. And then the last one is really just ensuring that in the spot on the compact where we look at the priority and focus schools, we've broadened that definition to include any school in a school district that receives the lowest rating on the Oregon School Report Card. This will bring in the non-Title I designated schools so that we are not losing sight of schools that are struggling just because they are not designated as a Title I school. I think that's all of the recommended changes.
Okay, I'm going to try this, see if there is a motion to accept this piece, and then a second, and then I'll open it for discussion. This has gone from input to subcommittee, and so let's just see. Is there a motion? Yes. Kay, you make a motion. Do I hear a second? Samuel seconds it. Any discussion about this? Hannah?
Help me understand when this will be implemented. When will they use this document?
So this document will be under the timeline as it exists in the law. This document will be sent to them right away as soon as possible following your adoption. and they will have the spring to complete it, and it will be due June 30th under existing law.
Okay, so the compact committees that started meeting at the beginning of the school year and have had a document that they've been working with all that data now, that's due February 1 to the school board. There's a timeline, February.
So the Dr. Cruz sent a correspondence to all districts a couple of weeks ago, letting them know that there was nothing that prevents them from continuing work. The Achievement Compact Advisory Committees will be able to continue work and provide recommendations to their boards following the February 1 date. And the February 1 date is really just the date by which they must convene and bring some preliminary recommendations to their board, but they are then empowered to continue working with the actual compact template and make final recommendations anytime prior to the June 30 submission date.
Okay, I think that is going to be another little slap out to those people who've been working. I think it's going to be difficult for them to make the change. I understand the changes, but that could be very difficult. I wanted to ask, we don't have the timelines, we don't have the ability to change the timelines here, but it was recommended that we have October be the deadline versus the June.
Can I just
Have
mention something? So that was a recommendation, and as soon as we started the conversations, there was a lot of excitement when Dr. Cruz shared the idea about the regional compacts. And many of the groups who were giving input said, we'd really like to invest our time and energy on that regional compact idea. It is in statute, so that would require a legislative change. We think there might be some other legislative changes down the road as we look at the regional compact. So at this point in time, we thought it made sense to make as few changes as we needed to right now, so that we would kind of take all those changes maybe at one time later once we think about the regional compact. I also want to just respond to your concern. We are one of those school districts that convened our, as an example, the Achievement Compact Committee early. Most of the superintendents who have been attending the meetings, which they're all invited and informed about, know that they were a part of the recommendations. So it really shouldn't blindside a district to know that we were talking about changes. Just to give you an example how our district is handling it, we have a document of recommendations coming to our board at the very next meeting. And our board will look at those and then look at the recommendations, if adopted, that come from OEIB, and then we'll ask the committee to take a look at it a few more times, especially as we start lining up our strategies with our budget process, and they'll continue to come back to the board with refined recommendations. So I just want everybody to know that this isn't like all of a sudden a change that nobody was talking about or thinking about. There might be a few people who say we weren't aware, we weren't sure about the change in timeline, but for the most part, people have been, superintendents have been kept aware of what the process was along the way.
I have just a technical need before we go on. It appears that any of us who have our cell phones near the microphones are interfering with streaming. I certainly was guilty of that. My phone also went off. So. But anyway, if we can just get them away from microphones. This is live streamed, and we want the people who are trying to listen to be able to hear it. So I'd appreciate that. Okay, so
help me understand, Yvonne, about the October deadline. I heard you say there were...
So we decided not to recommend a change in this one right now because it would take legislative action to do that. But you'll see when we get to the regional compact idea, there is an opportunity to submit the regional compacts in October. It doesn't mean that it's off the table to consider the next time around. It's just for this time, we're not recommending that change.
So if someone wanted to, they could take legislation to change that? Because I know there was a lot of talk about that being, from both the OSBA and OEA, as being a real help in being able to do the work that they're being asked to do. So I understand we're looking at the regionals. And is the deadline that we currently have one that will help us get the best results or not, is the question. So And then just there are a couple typos on the document that are very
Okay. Anybody else comments before we call for the vote? All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much. The adoption passes. So now I think we're going to hear about regional compacts.
Thank you, Madam Chair and the board. So the regional compacts are a proposal coming out of OEIB for a pilot in the coming school year. Actually, a pilot starting much sooner than the earlier school year. If I could just pivot or change the sort of metaphor that we've been using, I hear we talk about turning the dial and moving the needle. If I could just use the metaphor of the thermometer and the way we try to maybe elevate the reading of a thermometer, it wouldn't be by going up to the thermometer and putting a match under it. It would be by fundamentally changing the environment around that thermometer, and per our vision statement, measuring the conditions of student success and certainly the conditions that contribute to it. What the regional compact really tries to do is to look at more deeper underlying factors that create a lot of these indicators that we see when we look at metrics, when we see numbers, when we see percentages and figures. It says what are the underlying conditions that manifest in things like reading scores and math scores. So the idea was to present a data set to a region, which is tentatively being described as a sort of generally accepted feeder zone for a community college, and to allow that region to assess the data in a way that allows them to collaborate together on strategies for creating the underlying conditions that are creating those data. So there's three distinct purposes sort of driving the proposed regional compact. The first is to engage Oregon's P20 organizations in ongoing problem-solving dialogue. The second is to focus, align, and measure the value of our state resources. And lastly, to transition away from our institutional silos. Fundamentally, these are about building capacity in our larger regions to help our kids. And I think it's important we always remember that the sort of underlying purpose of our schools is to appropriately respond to the needs of our students and families. So we just always need to empower people to do that best. So by doing a regional compact pilot, what we're hoping here that will happen during the pilot process are a few distinct things. One, we're hoping that the participating members will help us define these regions. Again, right now it's sort of tentatively defined as the generally accepted feeder areas for the community colleges. But we know some of those lines get blurry in some areas, so we hope that the regions themselves would help us work those out. Second thing would be establishing protocols and procedures for how these collaborative processes would actually take place, where they would take place, what the conversations would look like, and what would be the sort of mechanisms for gathering data and generating solutions. Thirdly, we want to fine-tune the reporting process. Each region is going to approach this differently. They're going to have a different set of needs per their regional economies and communities. So we want to know what in this process would make it better, make it more effective, and easier for people to participate. So the regional compact has two distinct components. One is the actual data metrics that right now look very similar to the existing achievement compacts. In fact, the metrics that we're using are virtually the same as the existing compacts. The idea is that this information will be provided to the leadership of K-12 institutions as well as community colleges and four-year universities. And then they will convene to take part in the second level of the process, which would be the collaborative process of answering effectively two different questions. Those questions will basically say, what are the various social and cultural challenges that affect your institution's ability to be more effective? And then, once they identify these things, which might range anywhere from lack of resources to we have a drug problem, we have a gang problem, we have a large high rate of parental incarceration, we have any number of issues that you can imagine would affect a child's ability to learn. They list those out, and then they get together and they say, well, what can we do about it? So I gave a couple examples here, and I'd just like to read one aloud because I think it is a nice illustration of the way this collaboration might take place. So for example, a community college president and a university president recognize that increasing numbers of students are lacking writing skills upon entrance to their institutions. The university president might offer to extend the hours of his writing center and train new staff to run a similar center at the community college. Hearing this, a K-12 superintendent decides to take a closer look at his secondary writing curriculum and have a curriculum committee make recommendations for changes. That's just one way within that regional cohort that people could start to affect change. We always talk about the fact that if a student comes in lacking reading skills after 3rd grade, the amount of resources you need to correct that problem are tremendous, as opposed to just going after that problem right off the bat in kindergarten or 1st grade. So the idea here would be for them to be able to talk and say, look, the kids still aren't getting it when it's 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grade. Let's find a way to take this all the way back to kindergarten, 1st grade and address this problem. So there's an actual cost-saving mechanism built into it as well. And then also, as another part of this convening, we're hoping that this State Connections Conference, which would potentially happen at a state level, possibly in different regional locations, we'd bring out a whole bunch of agencies. And this could look like anybody from foundations, art groups, civic and cultural groups, PTA, COSA, Early Learning Council, YDC, businesses, 501c3 agencies, county organizations, and anybody who's affecting community change would come out and sort of run learning labs and say, look, here's what we do. We have a gang prevention program. We have a drug prevention program. And then leadership from these schools would get together and say, okay, I can see this program working in my school. This is how we might put it together. We could give them a room over here, just so they can start seeing and operationalizing some of these suggestions for how to change the fundamental underlying conditions in these schools that ultimately manifest in these numbers and figures that we see on current achievement compacts. I've included here just a brief collaboration tool. This is just a suggestion for what it might look like. It's a real simple process. People get in a room together, look at the numbers, and they say, what's the problem? They identify the underlying problems. They try to find some collaborative solutions, establish what resources they're going to need to do it, and then make it happen. So there's a few critical dates here coming up. The first, February 1st, we'd hope to see each entity identifying growth targets for the next academic year. This is consistent with the current targets in the February 1st deadline in the Achievement Compacts. By February-March, we would expect projected Level 1 and Level 2 growth targets to be finalized. And we would hope to have regions coming out to share with the board and the Best Practices Committee some of their ideas. We'd also want to talk about some of the regions where this is already starting to germinate and get some of their feedback about processes and protocols so they can help us design this a little bit more thoroughly for the people participating in the pilot. In May, we would have OEIB review what the final version of this compact would look like and ensure its ongoing evolution is sound. And then in July, we'd have our big state or regional connections conferences where participating regions and districts and colleges and universities could all get together and start meeting with agencies and start making their plans for improving the conditions in their schools. And then in August, September, they would all sit down and establish relationships and partnerships with their agencies and partners in the communities. And then by October, districts would submit completed achievement compacts to the OEIB that have their plans outlined. Leaving Best Practices Committee, we were left with basically two charges. The first would be to go out and do a survey around the state to see who's doing this right now, where this is sort of bubbling up, and who's already kind of got their head around it and can come and talk to the Best Practices Committee to talk about some of the finer details, like we said, processes and protocols that would make this easier for somebody approaching it for the first time. And that would be the second piece, obviously, bringing them to the table and having them share out their ideas. So that's the sort of very brief overview of the proposal for the Regional Achievement Compact pilot. And it's a very exciting process, and we think it really stands to make a difference in the lives of children and families throughout the state.
I just wanted to add a little bit to the next steps, and that is when we had the conversation about regions who are already having these conversations and sharing with us, I think the benefit is, again, learning from the wisdom of those who are already sort of, going down that pathway. There are groups who've already looked at best practice, who have identified some elements that are key. And so we're hoping that by listening to these groups, staff can help us look at where are those commonalities in terms of elements that might inform the OEIB subcommittee as to what would be the elements that would be, for example, in an RFP for a pilot district. So that's what we'll be taking a look at next time. We intend to have several more conversations around the achievement, the Regional Achievement Compact. And I just wanted to mention one other thing regarding the question Hannah raised about the dates. Because the submission date of this new concept would be in October, I would imagine the following year we'll have to do some reconciliation about the dates of the two different compacts, because we, of course, want to make this fluid and workable for people who are just in the middle of two different ideas right now. So just want to continue to raise up that there's always that room for more conversation, and that I would expect we'll continue to modify both compact ideas as we move down the pathway.
So, I just want to say in Lane County, we've been meeting for about 2.5 years, and although we've made great progress, as soon as we got it organized, the idea around the achievement compacts, it's really moved us tremendously. Our next meeting, which was supposed to be Friday, but we're coming to hear you instead at City Club, so we're going to rearrange that. We've included the early intervention people, so we are really seeing, even, I think, back to what Kay said is, or Nicole, we've got to get those early intervention people in too. So I'm just feeling a lot of energy about this. Every group I'm in is very excited about the possibility with this. So with that, I'm going to open it up for discussion, and we do have this as an approval item on the agenda, so we're going to discuss first, and then I'll call for the question after a bit of discussion.
And I think approval at this point is just kind of a thumbs up. Does this sound like a good concept to move forward on continuing to explore and bring more details back later? It's not, of course, an adoption yet.
No, but it sort of signals to people who are working on it that they can really get going and start meeting these timelines and sharing knowledge. So, any comments about, yes, David?
Well, we also talked about in the Best Practices Committee about streamlining the compact, the level 1 compact that's in there, which is in the proposal, which is currently just the templates for the 3 achievement compacts at each level, K through 12, community college, university, kind of put together in one long mega compact. And that for the regions, we should be going in the other direction. And Mark actually had a very good suggestion about, just concentrating on a early learning benchmark, grade 3 reading, something, one of the benchmarks we have for transitioning to high school, ready for high school, graduating high school, and then the degree certificates, just keeping those benchmarks that at the regional level, that we don't have to bog down the regions with a lot of this micromanaging that I think pertains more to individual institutions. And let's see what the best practices are that emerge from that, and keeping the general goal in mind of the OEIB, which is 40-40-20. And I believe we discussed that at some length in the committee, and I thought that was one of the recommendations to staff.
So, maybe that could be as these pilots come forward, because in Lane, I'm not saying we want every one, but we like the idea of having measures, because what we thought is if we can follow the cohort of students who come from Lane County, or whatever our region is, to see do they do differently coming from a comprehensive, coordinated system than students who come in and maybe haven't been in that. So, it really give you a possibility to say, is this really making a difference? So, one possibility would be just to let the pilots come forward.
And I'd also add to your point that the individual data would be there for each individual school district, community college, and university. That could be compiled in any way the region sees fit. But I'm just saying, for purposes of just aligning with the OEIB and the state's goals for 40-40-20, I think we could really look at a streamlined compact that would be a lot more usable, and focus more on the level 2 of this, which is the collaborative, siloless aspect of this.
And Madam Chair and David, and I certainly didn't overlook that, and that's a conversation I'm excited to have, because I agree. I think that this would go a long way to really emphasize the level 2 of this, which is really sort of the meat here. And I did see that as a product of coming out of these discussions once we start talking with people, so I kind of just bundled it in there. But I agree, I think that's definitely a conversation that needs to come out in the best practices.
So if today is kind of, just kind of if there is a thumbs up to start going, we can continue the conversation. That's the thing that will evolve, and we can continue that conversation. Matt?
Just one comment and 2 questions. First of all, I just want to express my support for the regional concept here. This is something that you've been shaping. I just want to say I'm equally excited as Nancy described. Second, I also want to express my support for the pilot approach. I think that's a wise decision. 2 questions. One is, are we envisioning it, assuming things go well here with the pilot approach, is this are these regions, regional compacts, are we envisioning this to be optional or mandatory?
Can I respond? So part of the conversation we talked about is that right now in statute, the first level of compacts still need to be submitted. But as part of that conversation about having a smaller number of metrics that are closely aligned with 40-40-20 and the incentives to work together regionally could cause this body to rethink the whole legislative piece and make a different recommendation. We may get down the road and say, wow, this is really creating a lot of positive energy and it's going in the direction we want. We see that this is going to move us forward into that 40-40-20 and maybe we want to go to the legislature. That's why I was saying we were waiting to make any legislative changes once we further considered this regional idea, because we might be asking for bigger changes to that legislative mandate than just a date submission. So I think there's a lot of room for that possibility.
Okay.
Right, I just wanted to say the value of the regional compact, as I see it, is that it's one of the first real concrete efforts of extending outreach to the social service community or the larger community to say the education of our children is all of our responsibility and not just the schools, not just the teacher. And I believe if we put this together in a way that we can demonstrate the effectiveness of it, the regions will want to proceed that way. I think all too often in our culture we have said the responsibility for education is the teacher or the parent. Well, it's all of the village. And I think this moves us in that direction more than anything that we're talking about.
Thank you. Dr. Crew?
No, I was...
Matt wasn't back.
Oh,
I have one more question.
I'm sorry. Is that what you're helping me with? Sorry, Matt.
So I on page 9, just under the state and regional connections of life, I didn't see listed here independent colleges, independent schools. And really begs the question around what is the role that have you discussed the role of the independents in the regions?
Actually, we did. After the meeting, a few of us were having sidebar conversations, and that's where the differences will really be kind of by region, and we were talking about the differences, for example, in Forest Grove, where we would probably include Pacific University. We're already partnering in many ways, and they're very interested in contributing. But we also need to be talking to PCC and PSU and Western. So we look at where do our kids go, as well as where is the community that's going to help support us. And so one of the questions I asked is, will we be flexible enough to say maybe a region like mine, I might be a part of this regional compact over here, but I might be also a part of another regional compact around a different goal. And so it could get kind of complex, but it also gives a lot of room for opportunity.
Any port in the storm. Any port in the storm.
Other comments? Yeah, Hannah.
I want to ditto what Kate shared about the regional concept, and I think she's absolutely right that this is where we have those conversations about the articulation and how we're all in this together. My concern with this document is that it goes way too deep. It's too prescriptive. We talked about tight loose. This is tight. I believe there's too much to do that will get in the way of what's really going to move the dial or raise the temperature, however you want to look at it, that is those conversations that are going to happen between the professionals and the parents and all of the community members that want to see our students succeed. So they're going to bring their compact with them. They're going to be able to share that data. I don't know that creating this document and taking the time to do all of this is going to be as helpful as saying, let's all sit down, let's talk about this, and now let's find a way to address the concerns that we have and those issues that we need to make sure that we've all discussed.
Yeah, and this comes right back to David's point about whittling this down to a few kind of central or really critical indicators. And the thinking too is that this would come pre-populated, so it would come. This would already be filled out, and they would walk in, maybe bring a few other supporting documents of programs they're working on or whatever they think would be beneficial for the conversations. But this is something that would be done before they ever received it, and then they would walk in, with numbers in hand.
And do you see in those individuals that are going to come together to have these conversations, you have PTA listed?
Absolutely.
Do you see parents and educators?
I see anybody who can contribute. I think teachers probably are the first people to be able to talk about the challenges that they face with certain kids. Administrators who are the ones, breaking up fights and then have those hard conversations about what's happening at home, and the counselors. I see everybody who can contribute to this being able to participate in that process.
So without any more questions, I'm going to just make a motion, which is that there's approval of this concept, knowing that there's also going to be more conversations about how many matrix, exactly how much detail, but just the idea of letting people get together and see what they can do together in support of students. And start that regional compact and get some models going, and just know that the pilots are going to inform us about where to go from there, and eventually there might be some legislative changes. So with that, I'm looking for a motion. Nicole, in a second?
Second.
Okay, great. Kay, second. Any more discussion?
Nancy, I'm sorry, can I just ask, we do have some groups that have been getting together who I think are doing some great things right now. I would ask that before we go too far down the road, that we actually engage in a conversation with those groups about what's working and what's not, so that we don't produce something that's going to get in the way of that work.
Yeah, and I heard her say those come to subcommittee. We can also talk when we do agenda setting if we want one group to come here with that kind of focus. So we'll take that as input. I've heard a motion, a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to take a 10-minute break, and then we'll get ourselves back on track on time. Okay. Next on the agenda, we have some invited testimony. And this is going to be exciting for all of us to hear, because this is testimony of school district superintendents and principals and maybe some teachers who have actually are some of our model schools. And so we're very anxious to hear what did you do to get the level of improvement you got on behalf of your kids. Now, what I wanted to talk a little bit about the process. We're going to just listen to all of your presentations first, and then we'll engage in a dialogue with you. And we would ask you as you go along, if you heard the previous conversation, so if there's anything about that that's useful to talk to us about at the same time, that would be great. So we'll just, I'm going to start by introducing Aaron Prince and let you introduce your team, and then we'll just go on down and each person can introduce their team.
Great, fantastic. Madam Chair, Dr. Crew, and members of OEIB Board, thank you for the opportunity. We are very privileged and honored to be here this afternoon. I want to start out by sharing from my perspective as superintendent in Corvallis. Really, this is about building capacity in effective leaders and building capacity in effective teachers and staff. and looking at enhancing systems that we know are tried and true and are promising. RTI is one, response to intervention, has proven to really help with reading and literacy and has great promise in the area of mathematics. You'll hear about that today from at least my two leaders. Also looking at the professional learning communities and the deep dialogue in PLC work with our collaboration spirit of data that we're looking at with our students and driving the formative assessments and engaging in that deep conversation has been very powerful in Corvallis. The other piece I would like to share with OEIB is the shifting of culture in how we budget and the conversation at our school board level around budgeting to the plan. And this is a new concept for us. It really is looking at equitable funding, student-based funding. And so we're currently in the process of asking for and looking at models that have taken student-based funding and equitable funding to the district level, school by school. This is new for us. It's scary, but it's the right work. And our principals are very engaged and will continue to be engaged in this model and in creating it for Corvallis. With that being said, I just want to let you know that the two young leaders to my right are exceptional. And Lisa Harlan and Rosemary O'Neill are leading two elementary schools who have been designated as model schools, and you'll have a chance to hear from them as to strategies and culture and hard, dedicated teachers and staff working to make a difference for our students. So thank you again.
Thank you. My name is Lisa Harlan, and I have the privilege of being the principal of Lincoln Elementary in Corvallis. Just a little bit of demographics about Lincoln. I'll speak for a little bit, and then I'll let Rosemary, she'll pinch me when I've talked too long. Lincoln has about 350 students, 70% free and reduced lunch, about 25% are ELL students, 30% of our students speak a native language other than English, primarily Spanish, and then we have a 12% special education. So that kind of gives you a glimpse of what our school looks like. I mention that because it's pretty different sometimes than what people think of Corvallis or maybe the rest of Corvallis. From 2008, if you take student achievement from 2008 and compare it to date, we have increased reading and math achievement anywhere from 20%, 20% is the lowest achievement gains that we have, to 70%. And so in key areas in our subgroups and overall. So for reading, for example, it went from 62% to 92%. For math, similarly. And I would attribute it to many things, but a few key things that my superintendent has alluded to already. Some of those things being the RTI process that is firmly in place in our school, and that's a process through which we look at all students and their progress and their growth every 4 to 6 weeks. The teachers, the EAs, anyone working with those students, we get together and we look and see how are they doing. And when they're not doing well or they're not progressing as we think they should, what are we going to do about it? Our PLC process, I think has been key, specifically as it relates to special education. So our special education teachers are part of the professional learning communities with our general education teachers. So when we're talking about math and what is happening in terms of curriculum and instruction for math, our special education teachers are there doing the same work, because in order to close the achievement gap for special education specifically, they will never close that gap if they never have access to grade level content, period. And that has been a key shift for us, and I think a key reason why you will see specifically for special education, our achievement in math jumped from 29% to 78%. And I would say that would be why. So, wow. A little bit about our place. I think the other thing that we do really, it seems like common sense, but when we talk about kids and we talk about where they're at, what they need and where they need to go, we talk about kids and needs. We don't talk about, we talk about breaking down the silos, but it's really about what kids need. And so it's not about, is this a special education student in special education in the special education department and a special education EA? Is this we talk about kids, we talk about what kids need, and then we just do that. You don't need to be in special education to get a reading intervention, or 2 reading interventions, or 3 reading interventions. You don't have to be an ELL student in order to get extra help by an ELL EA. You just need to be a child who has a need, and then we will fill that need. And so we're less concerned about who is what and where that money comes from than meeting kids where they're at. The one thing I would echo, the thing that keeps me up at night is something that Nicole had alluded to before, which is how can I get these kids in the door before 5? I need to get them in the door before 5 years old. We do that. We try to do that through summer school, and we have students who are going to start kindergarten come this summer before, and we have a summer school program in partnership with a local, a community youth organization that has been key for us in achievement. But man, if I could get them in at 2.5 and 3, it'd sure help out a lot.
Rosemary?
Wow, good job. Hi, I'm Rosemary O'Neill. It's a pleasure to be here, and I just want to start out by thanking you for the work you are doing. I am so excited to be in Oregon right now. I've been in 3 states, and this is a great place to be. Thank you. First of all, Mountain View, can you hear me? Mountain View is a school that, a little bit different than Lisa's. We started out 10 years ago with only 5% free and reduced, and today we're at 60% free and reduced. We're dealing with a culture change of staff and families. When I wanted to go from targeted title to full school title, I got calls about, well, we really don't want to do that. Do we really want to be a title school? How will that look? So starting with our population, our staff and our PTA, getting them on board. The staff, I want to start with the first thing, and it takes the longest to do this. It's about the attitude of our staff. We say all kids can learn. They don't believe it. They don't believe they can teach all kids. They go home every night feeling like they have failed. So we have to start there. You talked about your strategies. Strategies is so important. I looked at your list. I'd encourage you to continue honing out what those strategies are going to look like, especially with best practice. I'm going to share with you just 3 things that I experienced going through a reading first school in Lincoln County, then coming back to Corvallis and facing what we had with our culture. When I got there, the schedule, a little thing like a schedule. We had teachers teaching reading anytime they wanted. We had teachers teaching reading any way they wanted with any materials they wanted. It was unheard of to get all the teachers on board to agree. As a district, one of the biggest things we did was agree on Houghton Mifflin. It maybe not, is the program that has to be used, but at least it was an agreement on a strong program. So then what we did is we looked at our schedule. We said all teachers need to teach 60 minutes of reading. Well, what does that mean? Direct instruct reading. We had to get really deep about teaching reading. Reading what? Reading it how? So we changed our schedule. We made a master schedule. We put in 60 minutes of reading the first year. That didn't work. We put in 90. So now we have a block schedule of 90 minutes of reading. It was important in those blocks to have 2 grades teaching at the same time so you can use your staffs. Then we put in a 30-minute required intervention. Intervention for the high kids, intervention for all kids, in addition to that 90 minutes. Well, if it worked with reading, we decided to do it with math. So we're working on math and writing. The second thing we did is RTI. And RTI is thrown around a lot as far as a system. But basically what it is within a year, instead of just waiting till June to get a grade, a report card like all of us got, we are now looking at the kids who have trouble every 10 days. What did they learn in 10 days? With the kids that are kind of in the yellow, they're at risk, we're looking at their scores every 30 days, and we're looking at all kids' scores 3 times a year. And then we are doing something about it. So RTI has been a fabulous process. And the last thing which we're really realizing is our positive behavior support. We got kids that they're not making progress because of their behavior. So can you tier the behavior just like you did the reading, the math, and the writing, and give interventions in the same way to give those kids the skills? And the last thing I'll end with is the preschool idea is a fabulous idea. Our kids come in Corvallis at my school, 80% not meeting the pre-reading skills. And we take those kids, those 80%, and we move it up. We only had 10% of our first graders not ready for first grade reading last year, but that's in 9 months. That's really pushing it. That's with not double dipping, that's with 3 reading classes a day. So anyway, thank you so much for your work and for allowing us to share.
Thank you. So next we'll have Dan Grouting to talk about his school district. And I just want to say as a fellow superintendent that both of you are two superintendents I know many of us look up to, so I really appreciate your leadership. It's not only been at your districts, but also at the state level, and that's great.
Thank you, and good afternoon, and once again, thank you for all the work that you're doing, and in challenging times, but I would reiterate, this is an exciting time to be an educator in Oregon. I could just say ditto, because a lot of what they're doing, we're also doing. One of the things that I think that is important for any of these schools, you'll find out they're not managers of buildings, they're instructional leaders. And there's a big difference between a principal who is a manager and a principal who's an instructional leader. The other thing I want to reiterate is I think one of the things that we've done is taken the time to build our relationships with our bargaining units. They're the people on the ground that are doing the work, and to include them with every step along the way and make sure they're part of the process. And I think that's really paying big dividends to David Douglas. A little bit about David Douglas, school district of about 11,000. We are the highest poverty district in Multnomah County. There's over 80 different languages spoken in our school district. Elementary schools, 90% poverty, and our middle schools, somewhere between 70 and 80%, and a high school with over 70% free and reduced lunch rate. Significant second language population. The one thing I'm really excited and encourage this body to continue the drive forward is early childhood education. If I could do one thing in my school district, would be able to provide the opportunity for every child in my school district to have that early childhood education opportunity. Most of our school, we've had Portland State do a study, and our children, as far as number and letter recognition, are about 2 years behind their peers in other districts. So I think please keep doing what you're doing with enforcing early childhood education. Another thing that we're doing, once again, PLT, professional learning teams, data teams. Also, we've implemented a new second language delivery model. We can no longer pull our second language kids out of class to put them in a separate place. And it's been a struggle with our teachers. Our teachers are working, but they're starting to see the dividends, and I think that's paid a great thing. Another thing that we have to do, especially with underserved students, family engagement. It's one of our #1 priorities that we're working with families and investing in making sure, trying to get those parents into our schools and working with them. Another thing that we're doing with our underserved students is assistive technology for those underserved students. Being able to use technology, that teachers can use that technology to help those students learn and have resources that other kids have and know how to use that technology to bring things to them that normally they're not going to have. Finally, we're a new class district, and that's been exciting. I think one of the things that we have to do if we're going to move forward, as I know Corvallis is a class district, we need to learn how to evaluate and help improve instruction with our administrators and teachers. Otherwise, we're going to keep doing the same things, and we need to get better. Another thing that we're doing is scaling up, and basically it's a scientific method. If you're going to do an implementation, to make sure that you have the right things in place. We can no longer just throw things against the wall and see what's going to stick. We don't have the time or the money to do that anymore. So rather than a shotgun approach, you need a high-powered rifle, and we only have about 2 or 3 shells. So when you make that shot, you better make sure you're going to hit your target. And we don't have a lot of time or money to do anything. So I agree with Dr. Crew. Give us more money. What are we going to do with that money? Are we going to keep doing the same things and getting the same results? No, we need more money, but we need to do things differently. And finally, I'll just go back to a little bit, Dr. Golden, what you said, your regional compacts. So we are doing that in Multnomah County with all hands raised. And we are excited to be doing that. It's bringing superintendents and districts to work together to allocate resources and to get out of our silos of these are my kids, they're all of our kids, and we have a high mobility rate, and usually those kids are going to end up being your kids one way or the other. So I think it's a great idea and encourage you to keep on that track. So it's my pleasure now to introduce James Johnston. He is the middle school principal of Al-Assad, the only model middle school, I believe, in the state, and he does a great job. And once again, I'll just reiterate, basically when James came in, now he has less staff, less resources, but he's improved achievement, and I think one of the number one reasons is he is an instructional leader and not a manager. So here's James.
Thank you, Don. I was trying to get Betsy Hammond to substitute for me over here today because she was my principal for a day about a month ago. So good to see you again, Betsy. Also, if I stumble over my words, it's because when I was in my graduate school, Mr. Saxton came and gave me a guest lesson on communication. So yeah, please talk to him if I trip over any of my words. Seriously, thank you for having us here today to share a little bit about our schools. I didn't know where to begin because we've done a lot of things to change the climate at Al-Assad Middle School since I came. We have jumped also, like these schools, anywhere from 20 to 40 to 50% in growth. I actually almost didn't take the job. I was in Beaverton. I was offered the position. I looked at the data and I said, holy, what's going on over there? My mentor at the time, Joanne Holquist at Mountain View Middle, said, you need a challenge. So I went over there, started to do 5x5 visits, get in the classrooms daily, and started to see where the issues were. First of all, we didn't have a reading program. That's a significant problem when half of your students can't read. We set up a tiered intervention approach. After I met with our parent-teacher organization, my president of my PTO said, I had to take my son to Sylvan because he couldn't read. And I said, there's no excuse for that on my watch. Our job is to teach your kid to read. Our job is to teach your kid math and every other subject that we instruct at Al-Assad. So we set up a tiered intervention approach. We utilize System 44, Read 180, Sword of Success, and we also have a mainstream reading program. We doubled the minutes in our reading. We do 80 minutes daily in our 6th grade, 80 minutes every other day in our 7th and 8th grade. We also doubled the minutes of our math instruction. I was surprised we had kids with 4 electives, in other words, half of their instruction, that didn't know how to sound out a word and couldn't do a basic math computation. That wasn't acceptable, not on my watch. So we restructured our schedule. Now we actually have set up an incentive approach. If you exceed in math, you get to move up math levels, but you also earn an additional elective. So you have half the math time and you're able to accelerate at a faster pace. We've increased our advanced offerings from 4 advanced classes in math to 7. We hope to jump that to 9. Our goal is to continue to increase to where our whole 8th grade is doing algebra. One of my long-term goals is to have our 6th grade start a track where they can finish geometry before they get to high school. So I think we have to keep raising the bar. My school was about 74% free and reduced lunch, and I told my staff, honestly, I cussed in front of them. I used the word piss, and my mom and dad would be very disappointed. I said, it pisses me off when we say that free and reduced kids can't achieve because I was that kid. My parents didn't have money, but they had an incredible work ethic, and we shouldn't have excuses for achievement. So my staff, I handed them a list of all the kids that couldn't achieve and told them to pretend it was their kid. What would they want done? So we set up multiple tiered interventions. We use Marzano's strategies, a bunch of before, during, after reading strategies without muddying the details. We also did something that came from an innovation of my staff. I canceled some meetings for them. The trade-off is that we had targeted weeks where they contacted parents. So they contacted 10 parents a month. 1 week or 1 month was focused on phone calls, the next month was postcards, the next month was emails. And last year we did about 1,800 parent contacts, and I had parents stopping me saying I hadn't been contacted since 2nd grade. And they were saying how good my kid was. Now, talk about building a relationship with parents. When you hear how great your kid is, builds a relationship. Obviously, my boss is passionate about achievement in academics, and he supported me both financially. He's had to lay off a numerous amount of folks, but he's left critical pieces in my building for my reading and math program. Had I lost those, I don't know that we would be as successful as we've been. We also have strong discipline structure, but we use PBIS too, lots of rewards. As far as the 40-40-20, we're trying some things this year for college awareness. We've put all the teachers' college pennants up of where they went to university. We've asked the kids, we set up a competition where we gave out gift cards for what college they'd like to go to. Our next step is bulletin boards on how to fund and pay for college. We also, in March, we've invited multiple universities from the state to come in, and this is just middle school. And it's pretty tough to motivate a college to come and visit a middle school because they're not their normal clients to appeal to. But if we're going to be serious about getting these kids in college, a lot of them, their parents didn't go to college. We have to start introducing it to them while they're young. As far as some struggles, obviously, the loss of the staffing, long-term tracks to challenge students. When you start reducing funding, what happens is if you have a class of only 15 in an advanced math track, those classes start to slowly winnow. And I think that deters from our goal of 40-40-20. I would also suggest that maybe this committee considers regional college career days where middle school students are all invited kind of on a field trip where they can rotate around to the different universities and hear about them at middle school just as an idea so that all of us aren't trying to pull them into our schools. That's a quick and dirty summary of some of the things at Alisat, and I appreciate you taking the time to listen to me.
Thank you. Now this is the time for board members to ask questions, make comments. Hey.
Is it optional to have an instructional leader as compared to a building manager, or are those responsibilities combined in one position? You've spoken to them like
The reading coach, perhaps?
Well, they're one bit position. You have to be a man. You're managing people also, but I think the tide is changing. But just from the accountability now that different administrators are under, but I would pose that we still have several managers of buildings versus instructional leaders. And what our teachers need most is the instructional leader. They don't have to know or do everything, but they have to have the knowledge in which to assist teachers, knowledge of where to go to get resources.
I would expect that if you were to ask any of our building principals in Corvallis, that they would say it would be a non-negotiable with me as superintendent, that they are not instructional leader first. They need to be effective teachers as they are leading their building. And we are conducting walkthroughs, and we conduct walkthroughs together, so all of the district office staff goes right alongside our building principals on walkthroughs, and we're in and out of classrooms. I devote Thursdays as a superintendent to be in classrooms as I am watching instruction as well. So I model it, and it's expected, and that is the most important job for our building principals. That doesn't mean that they have to manage, and managing their building is operational, but that is the most critical piece.
One other quick follow-up. Rosemary, does everybody have an option to go to preschool, or how do you make decisions about who goes and who doesn't?
We do not have any preschool. We only have half-day kindergarten.
Thank you.
Other questions? Yeah, David?
Yeah, it seems a real common key here is a reading program, especially in the early years. And especially from what we're doing here at the board, it sounds like some of these we're ready to implement, or there's existing curricula or models out there you can adapt. But is there anything the state can offer in setting up a reading program or bringing this to other districts that would help either in resources or in a collaboration or sharing it would encourage other districts to set up reading programs?
You know, in thinking about that, I think more than a reading program, what it really is a system of, yes, we all need to have a core curriculum as a school district, as a school, kind of across levels, but more than that, you need to have a variety of different reading interventions that are pretty diagnostic. Is it phonics? What is the specific gap that a student has, and then is there an intervention to answer for that? So for example, at Lincoln, we probably have 7 or 8 different reading interventions because we have students who need different things, so that they're not getting a reading intervention for comprehension when really they just need a phonics intervention. So I think more than a curriculum or a program, you need to have a varied approach that specifically answers the skill gap that that student has. I think that what we have found is we have many more for reading than we do for math. And so implementing the systems that we have currently for reading, we're doing that for math. There are fewer things out there for diagnostically for math like there are for reading, but I think it's really a systematic approach that is varied, because by the time you're a 6th grader, if you're still not meeting for reading, you can guarantee that there have been about 10 or 11 things that have been tried that have not worked, so then you better bring out the magic then, right? Because things have already been tried for years and years and not successful, so you need something even better than you've already tried. Yeah.
So for 80% of your kids, a good basal reading program will do it. The problem is when you walk into a school and it's reversed and you have 80% not reading, then that basal reader still has to be used, but then we need to go to what Lisa's talking about. But I'm even talking about the 80%. We didn't even have the basal reader anymore. We had thrown that out. So the research on reading's been done. And what the state can do is continue to publish the good research on how to teach reading about the Big 5, what basal reading programs cover all those, and the standards are in there. Don't worry about that. The Oregon standard's going to be in there. So it's no secret on how to teach reading anymore. We just got to get those. But even if you have the materials, the teachers have to value that and be able to teach it.
The state also has a literacy framework, and I mean, at some point, making sure that districts are using that. And I mean, you have the RTI expert sitting there, Mr. Saxton. If every district, I think, could duplicate what Tiger Tualatin's doing, we would be well down the road. And I think, like this, when I got to our district, we had our reading curriculum, much of it was up in cabinets not being used. It hadn't even been unwrapped. We had within, and we still have some of it within our own district, kids not being subjected to the same content for the same amount of time as every child should be. So it's making sure that those instructional leaders in each building, making sure superintendents are making sure that it's done, and I think requiring that and being able to look at the data, and you can see who's doing it and you can see who's not doing it.
Matt, and then I would.
Well, thank you for joining us. Some very encouraging and impressive stories. I'm really struck by the magnitude of change that you've been able to achieve in a short amount of time. Thinking about scaling and scalability, what was the catalyst? Really, was it leadership change? Jason James getting relocated and reassigned? How much of this is personnel leadership, you talked about instructional leadership, versus more programmatic level changes? What can we think about in terms of scalability? So what's the catalyst?
Necessity.
The necessity's been there.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I think getting to the point, I was principal of a middle school before I was principal of this elementary school that was a pretty high achieving middle school. And so it was more difficult. Change was more difficult because it was kind of good enough, right? Staff felt like, oh, we're doing good. But it wasn't good enough. I think the necessity was really coming to grips with the reality, which was how poorly we were actually doing, how poorly students were actually achieving. And then I do think it's a lot of different things. It is getting the right people on the bus. It is, early on people would say, well, would you want your child to go to your school? Or is that really the best school? Or, I hear they don't have the best teachers. The reality is I have the finest teachers at my school that I've had any staff I've been principal of, because they have to be. They have to be, Because if you're not, it goes sideways pretty quickly. These kids are not coming in the door with those skills. And if you don't have the skills to be able to teach them that, it is evident almost immediately. And so I think necessity of the reality that we had to come to, that we were not doing well and something had to give. I think also having a culture where you know you're working with the best of the best. It's a bit intimidating, but if you don't think that you are one of the best, you don't come to work there. You don't apply. That it's not something that it's not your wheelhouse and it's not your passion. And so I think it's getting the right people on the bus. I think it's somebody saying something has to change and this is how it's going to happen. And then I also think it's about it's not about what's not working. If it's not working, fine, then what's going to work? We don't dwell a whole lot on what didn't work or why it didn't work well because, parents are incarcerated or because, there isn't anything, then what do we do? I mean, it's pretty solution focused, but there is some kind of hard-nosed, this is what we're doing. And the bus is leaving. I encourage you to get on or don't.
We all are so excited about this question. It's all kids, everyday progress, and if they don't, why not? Again, people don't believe they can do it. They have to believe they can do it to do this job. And the second thing is giving them the skills and the materials to do it. I had teachers who wanted it, but they just didn't understand those big five and that there's interventions. And when they see the success, they'll want it.
I have to credit our leaders. It's a big deal. Matt, you brought that up. They would be the last to give themselves credit, but they're the first that I would because they believe in their staff and they believe in building capacity and giving confidence. So often, our best of our best teachers need that boost of confidence and the capacity so that they feel like they are competent in the classroom with all students. And our exceptional leaders will do that for their staffs. They will roll up their sleeves. They will be in those classrooms. They're teaching side by side with our teachers. They will do everything possible so that one child is not lost. And their staff believes that. When I walk into these two buildings, the culture is all students can learn, and it doesn't matter whether you're a classroom teacher or you're serving food or you're helping clean the building. Everybody plays a part, and it's to their credit that they believe in that. Systems in place also is absolutely crucial, that everything is aligned and articulated, but the leadership is absolutely one of the most important and greatest impact on what's happening in these buildings.
So one last comment, and then we are going to have to just close this quick discussion so we can move to the agenda. So Dan?
Yeah, I'll let yeah, definitely. I think getting teachers to sell out and truly believe that these kids can learn, and that sounds like an easy one, but it's really a hard one. To really get every one of your staff to believe that regardless of race, ethnicity, poverty, that it can be done. And until that happens, you're not going to be optimal. And I think the first time I was at David Douglas as superintendent and I had about 600 teachers in front of me, I said, hey, there are a lot easier places to teach. Roll up your sleeves, because this is a hard place to teach with the high poverty and everything. If you want to go somewhere where kids are coming in with a lot better background, go to Lake Oswego, go to West Lynn, go to some of those districts where poverty isn't there, where you don't have second language students, where your special ed rates down to 7 or 8%. And when you get those teachers that want to do that, once they see it happen and believe, and get them to sell out for kids, you really see magical things happen.
Last comment.
I was told a quote years ago: ineffective systems hinder good people. And my job is to put the systems and the structure in place. But I can't take credit. I have some rock star teachers. I hired reading teachers that were phenomenal. I hired one that was my Title I coordinator that is off the charts. The second reading teacher, I had to go through multiple rounds of interviews, 70 pages of sublists to try to find someone that I felt was worthy of moving our kids forward. After that, laying the foundation of incredible teachers, and I put the systems in place, the teachers can flourish. And teachers care about kids. We drop the ball with the systems. And we can come up with all these fancy plans, but I would bet that many administrators and teachers couldn't answer the question of, what are you doing differently to help this kid be able to read? As simple as that is. When I asked my teachers which students couldn't read, when I first got there, I got blank stares. If we're going to address the issue of 40-40-20 for college, we have to not forget the basic foundation of reading and math and writing and hammer that hard, and I think we've neglected that at the middle school level. So I wanted to say thanks for adding math as a criteria at the 8th grade.
Thank you. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for making a difference for our children. Appreciate it. Okay, we are a little bit behind, but I have checked and we don't have that much public testimony, so we should be getting out of here on time, if not sooner. So with that, we're going to start getting subcommittee updates, and Ivana, I'm assuming we've already heard from your subcommittee. Yes. So who else do we have who's chairing subcommittees here?
So we had our second equity subcommittee meeting this morning, and we are having a very strong focus around creating a statewide equity lens. And we were fortunate to hear from 2 presenters, and we're really in the beginning stages, but we have a fairly ambitious timeline. We would like to come before this body in March and present a potential equity lens, and are asking for a significant portion of the agenda at that time.
Okay, thank you. Any other subcommittees need to report to?
Investment committee is no update.
Is what? No update. Okay. Anybody else have an update? So, just so the board knows, Rudy and I did talk a little bit at break about how do we find more time on the agenda to make sure we have time to process. I would say we're getting better at that, but there's still opportunities to even increase that. So we did hear that, and when we do agenda setting next time, we'll really focus on how do we do that in meetings. And I know Rudy's been talking about retreats, the importance of retreats, so where do we strategically place those so that we can continue to hear from the board. So with that, let me see, Seth, do we have any public testimony? Okay. Any last minute comments from any other? Yes, Hannah.
Just as I was listening to the testimony that was just shared, we have created a teacher and leader evaluation expectation that there will be evaluation tools. And we focused a lot on the actual teacher evaluation. We're down the road, we're doing great work out in our districts around that. And I know some districts have started the leader evaluation, but I think they demonstrated today the importance of us not letting that fall off the table, because the administrators, the work that they're being asked to do is an incredible amount, and the new teacher evaluation tools are looking at their expectations being raised greatly. They have to have the support, and we have to create an evaluation tool for them that makes sure that they're getting the feedback, that they're getting everything they need, because the impact that they have on our students is great. So I would just say it often falls off the table of the discussions that happen around the state, but I think it's an important one, and I support us doing whatever we can to help in that work.
Thank you. And I know in our district we're really focused on the administrative leadership piece right now, because I agree with you that that's so critical to support the teachers, create the structures. Any other last minute comments? If none, we're adjourned.